I'm Lucy Fromowitz. I'm the Vice Provost Students. Thank you for joining us as we acknowledge the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. December 6th was declared by Canada's Parliament as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, following the murder of 14 women at L'Ecole Polytechnique in Montreal on December 6, 1989. We are gathered virtually to reflect on this tragedy and to remember the 14 victims, while also recognizing systemic issues that continue to plague our society. In remembering the violence of this day in 1989, we must also reflect on the continuous violence still affecting women. This includes our Indigenous communities, our trans communities, as well as other marginalized groups affected by continued colonization, oppression, and patriarchy. At this time, I would like to give you a content warning. We recognize that our audience have people with lives, histories, and struggles that we are not privy to or aware of. Therefore, we want you to take a moment to provide a content warning for all participants that this memorial will contain material on sexual violence, disclosures, as well as other topics that may invoke strong emotions. If you feel activated or overwhelmed by the event, please, we encourage you to prioritize what you need in the moment. If you need to take a break, please do so. We also recognize there may be young children around, so we encourage you, if you are able, to use headphones. If you require support, please contact the Center for Sexual Violence Response, Support, and Education, or any of the resources listed in our support slides. At this time, I would like to do the Land Acknowledgement. And at this meeting, we know, as it is virtual, we are not all gathered in the same space. I recognize that this Land Acknowledgement may not be for the territory that you are currently on. We ask, if this is the case, you take responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I would now like to call upon Brianna Berry, who is our Indigenous Recruitment Officer at the Center for Aboriginal Student Services, to provide remarks.
I would like to begin by thanking the Center for Sexual Violence Response, Support, and Education for inviting me today to address the disproportionate colonial gender-based violence faced by my Indigenous kin. Indigenous women, trans women, girls, and gender diverse people are strong, resilient, resourceful, and brilliant cultural knowledge keepers and warriors. They are truly the hearts of our communities. Non-attributable to their character, they are amongst the most readily targeted groups for violence in the colonial nation of Canada. Last year, the National Inquiry into the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls revealed the gravity of the situation as genocidal, condoned and facilitated through colonial and patriarchal policies designed to diminish women's roles and erode their status within their communities and governance structures. Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse people experience heightened levels of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and to this day are subjected to coerced sterilization. As noted in this report, Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely than any other woman in Canada to go missing or to be murdered, and 16 times more likely when compared to Caucasian women. These are epidemic levels of violence. In the midst of a pandemic, these cases are only becoming more prevalent. One's place of residence is not always a safe haven, particularly in the face of enhanced social isolation measures. In the first 3 months of the pandemic, the Native Women's Association of Canada has seen a sharp rise in violence directed towards Indigenous women, with 1 in 5 revealing that they have been a victim of physical or psychological violence. Without adequate supports in place, especially in the more remote regions of this land, Indigenous women are forced to compromise their bodily and mental integrity to comply with pandemic measures. Another expression of colonial gender-based violence is the over-incarceration of Indigenous women, displacing them from their communities and inflicting severe psychological harm. Dire is their situation during the pandemic, as some federal prisons have enacted repressive and restrictive measures, such as greatly extending periods of cell confinement without access to cultural supports conducive to an Indigenous woman's well-being, which is a torture mechanism that results in significant stress and psychological harm. These significant instances of colonial gender-based violence inflicted towards Indigenous women are but a few examples of the institutionalized racism and misogyny in Canada. In order to begin addressing these grave situations that require immediate attention, their root causes must be named. The main structures underlying the colonial gender-based violence experienced by Indigenous women, trans women, girls, and gender-diverse people, colonization and patriarchy, are built into the foundations of this country and its institutions. These structures are often inspire subtle microaggressions which build a culture conducive to racialized, gender-based violence. For example, in the recently released report, Broken Dreams, Broken Lives, addressing the over 3,000 claims of gender-based sexual violence and harassment internal to the RCMP, former Supreme Court Justice Michel Bastarache revealed that the RCMP culture is built and maintained upon principles of racism, homophobia, and misogyny, shattering the one bad apple myth. One of 5 key findings also shows that the RCMP preyed upon Indigenous women specifically. They also concluded that no amount of internal policy change can override the culture that has shaped the institutional structure that is the RCMP. It is on this note that I encourage self-reflection on your relationship to power and how you may inadvertently support these structures. Racist, homophobic, and misogynistic acts exist because people support and embody these values and choose to enact them in their daily lives. Complicity and willful blindness to the devastating, widespread, and disproportionately high levels of colonial gender-based violence towards Indigenous women and girls and gender-diverse people only serves to perpetuate the issue and is indicative of one's privilege. To all of our allies, please continue listening to the experiences of Indigenous people, making space for them, relationship building, and supporting Indigenous women's organizations. And to all of my Indigenous relations working diligently to address the causes and effects of colonial gender-based violence, your advocacy is vital and has far-reaching, long-lasting impacts. And lastly, to any of my Indigenous sisters who have or are currently experiencing violence, you are not deserving of this violence. Please, please reach out to someone you trust or a local Indigenous women's shelter for support. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brianna. Today's ceremony is supported by our President and Vice Chancellor, Rhonda Lenton. I would now like to welcome President Lenton to provide welcoming remarks.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour, bonjour. I want to thank you all for making the time to attend today's event virtually. Every year, York University joins communities from across the country in commemorating the 14 young women whose lives were taken at L'Ecole Polytechnique in Montreal in 1989, and indeed all those whose lives have been taken as a result of gender-based violence. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, emerging data and reports show that we are fighting a second shadow pandemic. Violence against women and girls, and particularly domestic violence, have intensified over this past number of months. This news is disturbing, and it requires us to renew and recommit ourselves as individuals and as a community to swift and thoughtful action. More than ever, we must also be intersectional in our approach. We know that systemic inequalities related to race, sexuality, and socioeconomic status perpetuate violence. I would like to pause for a moment to reflect on the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, as well as members of the LGBTQ+ community, including transgender women, who have been victims of gender-based violence. If I can make one thing clear today, it is that the university will always be here to support survivors who decide to come forward. Amidst the pandemic, the Center for Sexual Violence Response, Support, and Education continues to offer all York University students, staff, and faculty all of its services remotely. I want to thank you once again for joining us today. Your dedication to ending gender-based violence is inspiring, and it gives me hope for a safer, more inclusive future. Animators from the Lassonde School of Engineering have created the rose that you will see shortly in memory of the 14 victims. Following the animation, I invite you all to join us in a collective moment of silence. Merci, miigwech.
On December 6, 1989, 13 female students and a female administrator at L'Ecole Polytechnique de Montreal were murdered because they were women. The shocking impact of their death led Parliament to designate December 6th as a National Day of Remembrance. We remember Annie Saint-Arnaud, age 23, fourth year metallurgical engineering student. Michel Richard, age 21, second year mechanical engineering student. Anne-Marie Lemay, age 27, fourth year mechanical engineering student. Sonia Pelletier, age 28, fourth year mechanical engineering student. Geneviève Bergeron, age 21, second year civil engineering student. Barbara Gagnon, age 22, fourth year mechanical engineering student. Maryse Lagagnère, age 25, school budget clerk. Nathalie Croteau, age 23, fourth year mechanical engineering student. Barbara Klochnik Wideszwik, age 31, first year nursing student. Anne-Marie Edouard, age 21, first year chemical engineering student. Hélène Colgan, age 23, fourth year mechanical engineering student. Maryse Leclerc, age 23, fourth year metallurgical engineering student. Annie Turcotte, age 21, first year metallurgical engineering student. Maude Avirnic, age 29, second year metallurgical engineering student. We remember.
Thank you, President Lenton, and those from the Lausanne School of Engineering who created the moving Rose Memorial animation. I would now like to introduce Mary Ranjabar, Program Manager of Women's Support Network of York Region. Mary has over 10 years of professional experience in the fields of management, education, social service provision, and critical and anti-oppressive social research. She holds a master's degree in cultural analysis and social theory from Wilfrid Laurier University, and is interested in projects and program opportunities that support and enhance positive growth within our community.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Ranjabar and I'm grateful to join you on behalf of Women's Support Network of York Region. The Women's Support Network, or WSN, was established in 1992 as a nonprofit registered charity. WSN is York Region's only sexual violence and rape crisis center. Overall, our work is divided into 3 portfolios: sexual violence, commercial sex trafficking, and prevention and awareness through public education. Today, I'd like to spend some time discussing the impact of COVID-19 and services for people affected by sexual and gender-based violence, and the work that we do at WSN to both eradicate sexual violence and to support survivors. WSN provides free, non-judgmental, and confidential services to people who have experienced any form of sexual violence at any point in their lifetime. We provide services in English and French, and we're able to get language interpreters for those who are more comfortable in another language. We also provide transportation assistance so that people can access our services with as few barriers as possible. In terms of supporting survivors, we have a 24/7 crisis line, youth chat services, a range of different counseling support, and group programming. Our counseling program is diverse and it includes rapid response counseling for immediate needs, individual counseling, and group counseling programs when funding allows. Our work towards ending sexual violence includes public education workshops and trainings, community outreach at festivals and events, and advocacy and media relations to raise awareness and bust myths about sexual violence. Sexual and gender-based violence, and particularly intimate partner violence, has spiked dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic and has been labeled by the global leaders as a pandemic within a pandemic. It is important to remember that sexual violence is still occurring during COVID-19. In fact, sexual violence is often made possible by situations of increased isolation and social marginalization. Here are some ways that the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting sexual violence. Pandemic stressors such as unemployment, financial stress, or loss of coping strategies can increase attempts to control others through their sexual violence. Also, social physical distancing measures may put individuals in isolation at home with others who may cause harm, for example, sexually abusive intimate partners or caregivers, and away from bystanders who might otherwise intervene to stop sexual violence. During the pandemic, sexual exploitation of an individual's financial strain may actually occur, such as demands for sex in lieu of rent or in exchange for food, other resources, or even a safe place to stay. There is also increased opportunities for online grooming and cybersexual violence, which may put individuals at risk during and after the pandemic. It's crucial to note that the complexity and the overall needs of survivors of historical sexual violence may increase during this stressful time as well. These impacts may affect people differently due to their individual circumstances and the intersecting oppressions they face, such as ableism, racism, cisnormativity, and classism. Even outside the context of a pandemic, there are often significant barriers for survivors to access sexual violence services. COVID-19 has exacerbated these barriers for individuals seeking support. Some of these barriers include difficulty finding private and safe times to reach out for support while isolated with others, reluctance to go to the hospital or to access other services out of the fear of exposure to COVID-19. Transportation is another barrier for some. For example, schedule changes to public transportation services limits the ability to access supports for folks. One of the main barriers that we have been seeing is separation from the informal supports, for example, religious community or co-workers, and coping strategies such as going out for coffee with friends or going to the gym could also act as a barrier. I would like to let you know that supports for survivors of sexual violence are available and sexual assault services such as WSN continue to operate. We are providing our counseling services in person and virtually by phone and online. We also have various virtual workshops, group programmings, and trainings available. If you or anyone you know needs support, please contact our 24-hour crisis line at 1-800-263-6734. Thank you.
Is not always the easiest path to take, but it is a path that promotes pride and confidence. As the 2019 L'Ecole Polytechnique Memorial Award winner, I am proud to represent women succeeding in the field of engineering. I have had so many opportunities presented to me that have not always been available to women, and I'm happy to say that these experiences have demonstrated how we can all be treated as equals. I have been welcomed into historically male-dominated workspaces and have been supported by my supervisors and my teachers as I strived for success. I am lucky to say that every supervisor I have ever had has seen my potential and has pushed me to reach for higher goals. With the support of my current supervisor, I have had the opportunity to study abroad, sharing my experiences with students and industry professionals that listened with open ears. They have all provided me with the confidence that women are equals and deserve to be treated as such. I am now in the process of finishing my master's in fire engineering and will be continuing into a PhD next year. I have published many research papers, and some of those are influencing the Canadian design codes. I want to share this confidence that has been given to me with all the women entering and continuing in the engineering field. I have mentored strong, independent female undergraduate students that I know will succeed in this field. They may not know everything yet, but if we instill them with the confidence that so many people have done for me, I know they will persevere. They are women of power, and we are all responsible for creating environments in which they will thrive. I have been the curious and excited undergraduate student before, and I want so many more women that enter into this field to be supported and surpass what I can even imagine of doing. So let us be inclusive and show women how much they can do when we support them.
Thank you, Mary and Chloe. I would now like to introduce a conceptual dance performance by York alumni and students. The Body Remembers is a 3-minute conceptual dance performance collaboration between Vishwavida, who will be dancing in Kathak, an Indian classical dance, Ira, hip hop and krump, and Jessica, dancing ballet. The shadow dance performance uses the dancers' bodies as a voice to express the systemic and often intentional erasure of trauma associated with sexual violence.
The body remembers. The body remembers how the heart within it pounds, the blood gushing through the veins. It remembers the love, the disgust, the erasure, and the gaze. The body remembers the worlds in which we must live, and it remembers the worlds it desires to live in. The body remembers in wonderment the places it goes, the loss, the gain, the presence, the absence.
Ta thei thei tat, a thei thei tat, ta thei thei tat, a thei thei tat.
The body remembers the fondles, the heat, the sensations, the joy, and all of a sudden, the body remembers deflating, the skin shrinking. The body remembers cocooning to protect itself. It remembers the betrayal, the surrendering in defense. The body remembers the relinquishing, the abandonment. The body remembers what it longs for, when it longs, how long it longs. The body remembers chasing something. It remembers what it is chasing, what it chooses not to chase. Then, the body remembers that it does not have to chase at all. The body remembers chasing memories, both happy and strange. The body remembers trying to forget those memories. The body remembers pursuing forgetfulness because it remembers that it does not have to chase at all.
Takita tikita kinta 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 takita tikita kinta 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 takita tikita kinta kinta kinta.
The body remembers how fast or slow it breathes in moments. The body remembers the strange knownness and unknownness of fleeting moments of temporal awareness. The body remembers, but it wishes to forget. The body becomes liminal. In liminality, the body remembers friction, the friction between remembering and wanting to forget, the friction between wanting to be seen and being rendered unseen. The body remembers desire. It remembers desiring desire. The body remembers refuting to be hidden and how it refuses to be disciplined, to be tamed. Then the body remembers undesiring what it's told to desire. It remembers rupturing, breaking free, and it remembers what it means to release. Eventually, the body remembers finding the grace it embodies, the strength that it holds, and the resilience within. The body remembers how it puts itself together. The body remembers when it puts itself back together. The body remembers it all. But do you? Then again, who does?
Ta thei, a thei, ta thei, ta ta tha.
The
The
body
body remembers, but
it
it wishes to forget. The body
The body
remembers.
remembers.
Hi folks, my name is Azinwi Kian. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the president of the York Federation of Students. Today we come together to commemorate the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. December 6, 2020 will mark 31 years since the tragic mass shooting at L'Ecole Polytechnique de Montreal on December 6, 1989, that unfairly and violently cut short the lives of 14 young women. Their only crime which led to this senseless act of targeted violence was because they were women. As we come together today in an act of remembrance, we must also reflect on how far we have come and how far we have to go. Today, gender-based violence is still an everyday lived reality for so many young girls, women, and the 2S LGBTQ+ community. It is our collective responsibility as a people to act and create safer spaces for those who hold these targeted identities in a world that is structured to deny and gaslight our realities. I am a Black woman in leadership. My presence here today is one which challenges a lot of structural and cultural beliefs all around the world today. There are people who still believe that girls and women have no place in the classroom, talk less of in positions of power or in leadership. This thinking and belief is a product of our patriarchal societies. Today, it might seem like we have come a long way. However, we can't begin to get comfortable because misogyny and sexism are real, prevalent, and persistent in so many different ways all around the world. And the targeted violence against women is still ongoing. I am able to sit here in front of you today because of all the powerful women and freedom fighters who put their lives on the line and did not take no for an answer. Just like those who came before us, we must continue to fight. As we remember the lives lost 31 years ago and so many others through the years, documented and undocumented, we do so with a purpose to fight and actively dismantle this culture of targeted violence that affects the most marginalized even on our campuses. We deserve a world free of misogyny, sexism, and hate. I am here today not just to remember the fight and the lives of those who came before me, but to continue that fight for a better future of consent, respect, and dignity for those who come after me.
Salut, je m'appelle Angelica et je suis une étudiante de 4e année dans le programme de communication à Glendon et la vice-présidente opération pour l'association étudiants collège Glendon. Il y a 31 ans, 14 femmes, toutes étudiantes sauf une, ont été brutalement tuées dans un acte de misogynie emprunté. La perte d'une personne est un décès de trop, mais la tragédie née du massacre de Montréal est un sobre rappel de ce que les femmes canadiennes ont subi sous un régime patriarcal oppressif. Ce massacre, inspiré par une haine profonde envers le sexe féminin, ne doit pas être minimisé en tant qu'action d'un individu perturbé. L'histoire turbulente de la condition féminine au Canada est bien trop sombre et injuste pour justifier que la qualité de tragédie essentielle la mort de 14 femmes innocentes. Aujourd'hui, nous devons reconnaître que la violence sexiste continue de blesser des femmes de diverses identités selon un nombre inquiétant de dimensions. Pour aggraver ces problèmes invisibilité, menace d'obstruire la vie entourant la violence de genre. Ce n'est pas la vie de chaque femme qui est commémorée comme le sont aujourd'hui ces 14. Il y a actuellement d'innombrables victimes de la violence au Canada sont confinées au silence et à l'effacement. C'est ce qui se cache dans l'ombre de la pandémie, une violence fondée sur le sexe. Tout au long de la pandémie, on a constaté une augmentation des appels à l'aide aux lignes d'assistance et refuges pour victimes de violences domestiques provenant du monde entier et émanant de plus d'1 million de femmes et de filles ayant subi des violences sexuelles et physiques. Ce nombre va continuer à augmenter et avoir un impact sur le bien-être et la santé sexuelle et reproductive, ainsi que la santé mentale des femmes. L'acte de violence contre les femmes qui a eu lieu lors du massacre de Montréal ont plus de millions de personnes qui souffrent en silence à la maison. Un problème qui ne devrait pas seulement concerner les femmes, mais aussi toute notre communauté. Nous sommes en solidarité avec les femmes qui continuent à faire face à la violence en ce temps sans précédent. Et nous avons pris les mesures nécessaires pour apporter un soutien à nos constituants. Grâce à la mise en place de notre directeur de chef de l'équité, qui veille à ce que les cas de violence sexiste ne soient pas tolérés et que les mesures appropriées soient prises pour soutenir les victimes. Merci.
Thank you to the dancers, Azinwi and Angelica. I would now like to introduce Debbie Owusu Akea, Executive Director of the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity.
Hi, my name is Debbie, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently based here in Ottawa on the traditional and unceded lands of the Algonquin people. I'm also the new Executive Director at the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity, where we work to empower gender and sexual diverse communities through education, research, and advocacy. And we do this by running youth-focused programming nationwide. One of our programs that I'm actually super proud about is our Intimate Partner Violence program. It's shone a light on how violence comes up in partnerships of queer and trans people. I'm grateful as a queer person myself for programs like this because it just shows the specific ways in which systemic violence that is gendered, that is sexualized, it impacts us as people who are navigating the world, dealing with homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. I'm super grateful to have been invited to kind of share some remarks with you and some thoughts because this work, the work that we're doing with anti-violence initiatives and activism, it means a lot to me. I've been working on anti-violence work for almost a decade now. And most of it started, just similarly with a lot of you, through my involvement with the student union. It started for me as a volunteer at our Women's Center, and then eventually becoming the programming officer, where I ran very large awareness campaigns, kind of focused on the different types of gender-based violence that we see, but then also using December 6th as a learning opportunity for all students to kind of show awareness of what happened on December 6th, 1989, but also what continues to happen in our communities, including on our campus. It's an opportunity for us to kind of bring community members as well as survivors and students together to kind of have a space of mourning and a space of remembrance, but also a space for us to kind of organize together. And again, looking back at my experience, we used to do a thing where we would take students to the vigil that we had in Ottawa. And Ottawa is a interesting community, if anyone is aware of it. I think we are very small, but very mighty group of feminist activists. And that vigil every year is something I try to attend, no matter how cold it is. And I think what I will always remember about the December 6th vigil is the active choice of the organizers to actually name not only the women who were murdered at L'Ecole Polytechnique in 1989, but also naming the different instances of women and victims of gender-based violence here in the Ottawa area and here in Canada. As a Black anti-violence activist and feminist, there's definitely something interesting about doing advocacy work that, brings to light, of course, something that is important for all of us to recognize and for all of us to prevent and combat, and that is violence against women. But I'm doing that in a world that actively prioritizes the voices and experiences of white women, while at the same time almost screaming at the top of my lungs on the importance of focusing on the stories that we often fail to hear. And those are the stories of women of color, Indigenous women, trans women. I know this firsthand, talking about what this erasure looks like for me as someone who's been impacted by violence. But I also work on the governance side in a women's shelter nonprofit here in Ottawa, so I know what that looks like for survivors who are impacted by navigating, services that aren't culturally relevant to them and that ignore those particular nuances that will blame them for the violence that they experiences or not believe them or recognize it at all. I want to reiterate that gender-based violence is just that. It's a violence that impacts us because of gender. And gender is an explicitly political thing. It's a colonial thing. And that colonial project of introducing gender the way it is as a binary. We've seen the impacts on Indigenous communities here, on the lands that we all occupy. We've also seen this in the erasure of the news reports on the deaths of Black trans women. And I want to bring to light what has happened recently with Coco in Toronto, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, where what was a response to a mental health crisis has resulted in the death of another Black trans woman. And not only that, even in her death, having to experience being misgendered not only by police, but in the media. It's an ongoing violence that people like ourselves have to go through. And not only that, I want to talk about, the violence that is inflicted on migrant women who are racialized, who are also subjected by particular violence from the state, where in disclosing that they are subjected to particular violence due to the precariousness of their work, they're subjected to possible deportation. I say all this because it is important to note that there are just so many more stories and nuances to the violence that is impacted not only by women, but gender diverse people. There is so much more to be said about what it is to deal with gender-based violence, but then also racism at the same time, and also transphobia at the same time. I think for young student activists, you have a role to play. And that role to play is not only bringing awareness to something that has happened, that has shifted and shaped, Canada's approach to addressing gender-based violence, but also naming the fact that violence doesn't stop just with white women, that violence impacts women differently based on these other identities that impact them. You have a role to do in naming that. and bringing it to the forefront. And if there's any advice that I could give you all, is to not to be afraid to do it.
Thank you, Debbie. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you for joining us. Please continue to show your support against gender-based violence by wearing a purple ribbon throughout the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, by learning more about the issues raised by our speakers, and by supporting organizations that do this work. This issue affects everyone, and it is important that we work together to take action and provide support wherever we can. As York University community members, please remember that you can reach out for support in regard to sexual or domestic violence to the Center for Sexual Violence Response, Support, and Education. Thank you for joining us.